Great to see the registration list with quite a diverse group of people. We've got academics, practitioners, people from policy as well, from locally as well as nationally, and across the border north. So it's great to have this event finally happening after a lot of effort and planning. So welcome. We have a very action-packed agenda today. Hopefully you've received an agenda with your registration pack. We have a range of excellent speakers I'm delighted to have coming again from across the country, as well as people locally. Hopefully, I assume we'll have lots to talk about given this diversity and given this very, very topical issue of stress. So I hope you've come with your ideas and that you're willing to share those ideas here. This is a health summit, so the idea really is to draw in together people from across the region to raise the issues that are important, to reassess the current state of stress in our area and think about ways that we can address it together. So I'm Emily Henderson. I'm the event chair today, and I'm a Fuse Lecturer and Research Fellow at Durham University. I've co-organized this event with Dr. Jo Kant, who's at the back of the room, tweeting away and keeping things in order. She's also in the program this morning, so you'll get to hear from her. I'd like to thank our sponsors. We have, this is obviously a Fuse event, as Claire has explained, but it's also a Wolfson Research Institute sponsored event, including the Center for Public Policy and Health at Durham, and it's also within the Fuse Knowledge Exchange event. It's also a Complex Systems Research Program event and a Health Inequalities Research Program event, which are research programs within the Fuse organization, as well as LARIA, which is the Local Area Research Intelligence Association. So I just wanted to thank our sponsors, because we've had quite a range of sponsors helping out in a range of different ways to help make this happen. So I mentioned the Wolfson Research Institute for Health and Wellbeing is within Durham University. It's based down at the Queen's campus in Stockton, and it has a range of special interest groups there. And I lead the Stress, Health and Wellbeing Special Interest Group, which, as you can see, we have a range of themes that we explore. This is our first year running. So I'm really excited to have the Stress Summit as part of the Stress Special Interest Group. You can find out more information on our website if you'd like to. But I organized this special interest group, just being aware of the rise in the widening of health inequalities, obviously as a result of the last few years of austerity measures and the general global trends in that direction. And given my background, my research background in stress, throughout my research career, I thought it was a good time to kind of broaden that out and get ideas from outside and draw people together. So the purpose of today's event, as I say, is to gather us together. To hear from people in academia, to hear the latest evidence, as well as hearing from people in policy and practice, and as a room, as a wide group, collaborate on ideas on how we can address those issues that are raised today. So that being said, I'll just go into a couple slides here about why study stress. So Claire did an excellent job giving us that historic and national perspective on why stress is important to health. More recently, the Mental Health Foundation carried out a survey and found that nearly half of UK adults report feeling stressed every day or every few days, which is probably a statistic I don't need to tell you because we all know this. In terms of health, it's associated with a range of health issues: mental health, chronic pain, CVD, as Claire highlighted, as well as so-called behavior-related health issues like addiction and obesity. So really, research is showing us that stress is not just specific to mental health or cardiovascular disease, which we're already aware of, but it permeates our lives in a range of different ways and a range of different of health-related issues, ones that you might not automatically associate it with. So when we talk about stress, there's a range of kinds of stress, and we can talk about any of these kinds today. There's acute stress, which occurs sort of as a one-off in an extreme event, which then eventually people recover from. There's post-traumatic stress, which is obviously as a result of quite severe experiences and is associated with mental illness. But as Claire indicated, what we'll mostly be likely focusing on today is chronic stress, which is long-term stress that can be very detrimental to health over the long term. And it's something that we adjust to, we get used to, we adapt to it, even though it's a maladaptation. And chronic stress, as I said, is associated with mental illness as well as other issues. So the experience of stress is really associated with one's ability to cope with that stress. So when we're not stressed, we feel able to cope with the issues that we're faced with inevitably in our daily lives. So on this 2x2 grid, you can see demands at the top and coping resources on the right. And when demands are low and coping resources are high, we're fine and we're coping, we're going through life. We might even be happy, if that's possible, in today's world. But on the other end, if our coping resources are low, we don't have the skills or resources, or either internal or external resources, and the demands are quite high, that's when we start experiencing stress and start losing our ability to cope with the situation. What fascinates me about stress as a topic to research is it's a universal experience. So stress is a biological reality. It's something we can measure. And it's something we can study in non-human animals where we can see predictable responses in terms of behavior or physiological responses. But stress is also something that we experience internally in our minds, as well as socially in our external worlds. And it varies across culture, the way that people experience stress. So the way I feel stress might not be the same as people in this room, and it certainly won't be the same as people across the globe. Because emotions are expressed through cultural contexts, through the ways that we associate and we construct the world. So in terms of research, there's a strong role here for interdisciplinary and participatory research. So not just people studying from different disciplines, but also engaging people who are experiencing stress, people who work with people experiencing stress, to really get involved in understanding the issues that are going on, because it's so multifaceted and so pervasive in our lives. And finally, just to mention about stress and health inequalities. So we've called this this stress summit, or health summit rather, a summit on health-related, stress-related inequalities. I've summarized here a review by Theuts, who I've not referenced, I must have deleted that, in 2010, where she found in a review of reviews that different experiences of stress by gender, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, for example, lead to inequalities in physical and mental health, including discrimination stress. Stressors occur over the life course and across generations, which widen health inequalities, because it's something that not only an individual experiences, but it's something that can be passed along across the generations, either developmentally, in utero, or through behaviors, for example, coping resources and that sort of thing, or through just diminished resources and other disadvantages. So the policy and practice recommendations made in this review highlight the importance of addressing the structural conditions that put people at risk of stressors at the macro and meso levels of intervention, and focusing on children who can be affected early on with stress, which is something we'll hear later on as well in terms of the life course, and trying to put an end to the intergenerational effects of stress, as well as more micro-level actions such as coping and support interventions. And it goes without saying, in the UK and the Northeast, with the recent austerity measures, possible continued austerity measures, and we can be certain that there will be uncertainty in the next few years, and continued stress is going to be a topic that we'll all be concerned about, either personally or professionally. So with that said, just want to go over the structure of the day, so you have a roadmap of the next few hours in your mind, as well as some housekeeping. So in the program, which you've got the detailed version of it, we've really built in a lot of time to hear from the audience and to engage and to have a conversation. So hopefully this isn't going to be a viewing gallery where you're watching speakers, but it's going to be more interactive. So for the talks this morning, where we get the update on evidence, we have a series of speakers who've allowed 5 to 10 minutes after their talks to open up to wider questions or to facilitate conversation. So we really hope to hear from everybody. In a similar form for the second session after the refreshments, hearing from local practice. And then we have the panel discussion at the end, which of course the wider group is welcome to join in. So just a bit of housekeeping then. If you haven't found the toilets yet, they're just right out this door and through the doors at the end. I've not been told of a fire drill, so if there's a fire drill, we're going to go out back through the foyer when we come out the top of the stairs, just outside there. We are filming today. One of our PhD students, Olivia, is here filming. Just so you know that that's going on. We're not going to be filming the discussions, we're just going to be filming the speakers' presentations, so you don't have to worry about that. And we're not going to be filming the audience as well. I'm going to do my utmost to keep to time. We do have a lot to cover. Just thought to suggest, I will make that suggestion later actually. I will hold that. There's a little mystery there, and I'll tell you about it later. As you can see on the slide, we have tweets going on right now, so please, if you tweet, please do so. We have hashtag posted up here in this column, some hashtags and some addresses, and they're also posted here, but obviously the slide's going to change. So yes, that'd be great to get the conversation going outside this room as well. So, unless anyone has any burning questions related to housekeeping or structure today, we'll go ahead and get started with our opening address from Gregor Henderson, who is the National Lead for Mental Health and Wellbeing at Public Health England. And he's come up from London today. I'm delighted to have him here. He's going to give us a very exciting address to give us the national perspective on stress and future directions that they see at Public Health England, or that Gregor himself sees being the next upcoming topics that we need to focus on. So Gregor, please. You all welcome Gregor.
Thank you very much. Thank you to you. Thank you to Emily. Emily Henderson, no relation. Although last night, with the name Henderson, we are now personifying ourselves as being of vital descent. I'm Scottish, for all of the English people know, so I've taken very little interest in Euro 2006 till last night. Yeah, sorry. Leia, can you give me a shout at 10 minutes as well? That would be really
Do you
helpful.
have slides?
I do, yeah.
Yes, I will let you know.
Great. So what I'm going to try and do is from 2 or 3 perspectives. One, from my own perspective. Secondly, from a Public Health England perspective. And third, from that kind of bubble of Westminster policy. What are some of the issues that are bubbling around that might be quite interesting when one thinks of stress and the psychosocial responses? I thought both the opening setups were really helpful for me to clarify some things, because what we're trying to do in Public Health England is to try and see some of the mental health issues in a much more differentiated way. I don't know about you, but when we start talking about mental health issues with people, it immediately defaults to mental illness. And then it defaults to services, then it defaults to resources, then it defaults to power balances between biomedical and others. And before you know it, the whole conversation about mental health, about good mental health and what we might need to do to keep good mental health, has been drowned out, forgotten, not even emerged. We have a chief medical officer. Perda's over for me, by the way, so I'm going to be very indiscreet. We have a chief medical officer who sets her face against the notion that there might be something called mental well-being. And if you haven't read her report from last year, Public Mental Health Priorities, please do read that. Chapter 2 is a very unbalanced critique of well-being and a very unbalanced critique of public health approaches to well-being and mental well-being. The rest of the document is fine because it concentrates on subjects that 90% of the authors of that topic. How can you talk about public mental health and 90% of the authors of that whole report be from clinical and psychological and psychiatric backgrounds? To me, it doesn't make sense. So what we're trying to do in this agency called Public Health England is trying to move the narrative along a little bit. And that is extremely challenging. So I'll do the advert first, just get out of the way. We are a government agency, still a government agency. We have 3 key functions: protection, knowledge, information, and health improvement, 8 centres around the country plus London. And we are there to support the locally led public health system. You'll have heard a lot about devolution, local devolution, local empowerment. Our role as Public Health England is to support local areas to do what they want to and what they need to do best. So we have a very different system, less command and control. So we protect, we improve, and we build capacity through local systems. We try and do that from the application of evidence. We have, as one of our key things to do strategically and operationally, is address health inequalities. You'll be the judge as to whether or not that's improving or not. And we really are trying to advocate for more of a place-based approach. That might not always come across, but at heart that's what we're trying to do, and trying to shift some of our focus away from individual lifestyle disease health lifestyle issues into something a little bit more strategic. And we obviously want to make sure we're taking a life course approach. So I would say the project Public Health England is still a work in progress, but the need to do something different is very, very pressing. Okay, health. So we heard a little bit about Marmot this morning. You are all very well aware of this backdrop. This isn't always the kind of conversation that goes down well in some of the quarters that I have to operate in as I do my work. So health, it's socially determined and socially shaped. Come on, we know that. It's much more than the absence of illness. There is a social gradient, and we need to address the causes of the causes. That's not been the easiest trick to pull or the easiest narrative to build in the last 4 or 5 years. We know where the key areas are, and sometimes even at holding the face of the best possible evidence, we still sometimes can't get the policy machinery to operate around this. The Prime Minister, the ex-Prime Minister, or the now in transition Prime Minister, was about to launch a life chances strategy. Did anybody in the room hear about that? So this was, you use the word life chances, you don't use the word strategy to address poverty and deprivation. So life chances. So that gives you the sense of neoliberalism where this is coming from. And in that, there was a lot made of early childhood experiences. What we were beginning to get a little bit disappointed about was the language teetering back over to individual responsibility. So whilst life chances might have been an encompassing strategy and a possible strategy to put some of these biopsychosocial stressors in there, particularly from early childhood, adverse childhood events, how that affects things through your social upbringing, family environment, I think we would have struggled to get all the evidence in there that we wanted, but we now have to wait and see what's coming. We are also doing some background work with the PM staff and the Cabinet Office on a new mental health strategy. A strategy, now that the Mental Health Task Force is published, that gives more money to the NHS to make sure mental illness treatment services do what they need to do, and do them with additional money, 1.25 billion, nice. None of the task force resources or recommendations for prevention, for suicide prevention, for mental illness prevention, brought with them any resource. So we've been trying to advocate into the so-called about to be written Prime Minister's mental health strategy, and we were getting a lot more traction. Mental health literacy, emotional literacy, issues of embedding psychosocial issues within how you address obesity, how you address smoking, how you address cardiovascular disease. We now have to wait to see whether that policy opportunity has also been lost to us. So behind the scenes, what I'm trying to say is there's a very complex set of narratives going on and a lot of competition within the kind of policy environment and frame that we have to try and make a difference to some of the work that you're going to be talking about today. So it's tough, it's competitive, it's intellectually challenging and deeply frustrating and incredibly stressful, but sometimes stress is good, isn't it? So, well-being and mental health. I just want you to just latch your eyes on some of these definitions, and I really want us just to keep thinking about the need to broaden the narrative, because if we do things in isolation, so I head up a public mental health team in Public Health England. Our job is not to do mental health for Public Health England and the public health system. Our job is to support others to understand the difference between good mental health and mental well-being, mental distress, which we'll all experience, mental health problems, some with clinical differentiation, some without, and full-blown clinical identifiable mental illness. Even that terminology is a contested one, mental illness. So what we're trying to do is to make sure we can operate on all of those different narratives, all of those different levels. Of course we have to improve the life of those challenged by severe and persistent mental illnesses. Of course we have to do all we can to prevent mental health problems, and we should be doing much more to understand the nature of what mental distress and what you'll be discussing today can mean in terms of physical, mental health, its impact on our environment, its impact on the way we think, feel, behave, and relate. This whole notion of the public's mental health is deeply precious, but also making sure we get across what good mental health is. So we quite like some of the way that mental health and well-being is beginning to be discussed. People have put mental health and well-being, or mental well-being, because they're trying to rehabilitate the phrase mental health, because that means mental illness. And sometimes that's been done with some success, sometimes not. And sometimes the well-being narrative can get dragged down into well, what does that mean for people with mental illness? So there's a lot of intellectual and territorial tussling going on in this particular arena, which I think you will also experience when you talk about your work. But the issue is to get that work embedded in the work that other colleagues do. Our obesity colleagues, our smoking colleagues, our alcohol and drugs colleagues, our cardiovascular colleagues, our cancer colleagues. That's the most important thing. Emily and others have gone through this, so let me race on. So we have a number of challenges. An aging population. Many, many more people have a set of both physical and mental health long-term conditions. There's this notion of comorbidity. Inequalities persist or are getting worse. People's expectations of services as being the things that will help fix them are rising. Financial constraints, as we know about. People want more responsive, individualized services. They want more control and influence. And communities have become much more fluid in the way that they exist and the way that they evolve. So, a lot of challenges. If we think about some of the bigger challenges and try and get them down into some bite-sized chunks, psychological well-being is not necessarily improving. There's a greater literacy about psychological well-being, but we need to be careful about pathologizing that. We need to be careful about legitimizing what you and I would call legitimate experiences, feelings, and emotions into some kind of problematic model. Community vitality or community strengths seem to be eroding. Not everywhere, I mean, I'm sure you know many, many communities around here where that sense of community cohesion and community vitality is incredibly strong. What can public agencies do when areas, communities, begin to lack the vitality they need, begin to have reduced assets rather than increased assets? And this is a really interesting slide, which we use when a lot of our tobacco cessation colleagues are not in the room, because if you look at this, the impact of social relationships, if you have good social relationships, or if you don't have good social relationships, that's the equivalent of 15 cigarettes a day. So that doesn't mean to say, you know, have lots of friends and smoke. That's not the public health message I'm giving here. Although you could take that away, but I'm not going to encourage that from student residency. Okay, so that's an important issue to think about social relationships. What often happens in this debate is that we start looking at inequalities and we, as you are doing it, you're looking at the psychosocial implications of health inequalities, of deeply embedded inequalities. And this, you'll know about the book, The Spirit Level by Richard Wilkinson and Kate Pickings. Need to shift away from material standards and economic growth to improving the psychological and social well-being of societies and populations. This is a great narrative that within the current political context, these are extremely difficult concepts for our policymakers to give time and attention to. And Lynn Friedley, who some of you will know, and who gave an amazing lecture here about 6 or 7 months ago at the Wolfson, talks about the levels of mental distress amongst communities needing to be understood less in terms of individual pathology, because that's what we do. And I go to many conferences and seminars about resilience and the need to build resilience. I go to city meetings of companies which are finance companies and legal companies, and they talk about the need to build the resilience of their workforce, as though building resilience means that we can continue to pile more and more work and pressure on them. So I'm anxious about some of this language, and I think Lynn hits this on the head really, really effectively. Let me go through some quick opportunities. Can I take 2 minutes? Would that be okay? So, in the face of all of those things, and 10 minutes isn't enough to do justice to the complexity of it, I'm going to offer 3 or 4 emerging optimistic strands for the future that aren't at the behest or necessarily going to be either broken by 4 to 5 year or perhaps 2-year terms of political cycles. So these are the deeply embedding things that should outlast political cycles of 2, 3, and 5 years. The first is something we've known for a long time, which is the strength of working with communities. And Public Health England have published a very well thought of document about community-centered approaches to health and well-being. A family of interventions and the absolute public health benefits of taking these approaches. There's a really good knowledge base. There are some very, very good case studies. We know it supports local action that needs to be taking place. If there's one take-home that I think you will enjoy from some of the myriad of publications that we produce, then that's certainly one of them. The other one is building our workforce and leadership beyond the immediate public health workforce into other workforces, whether it's housing or employment or the voluntary sector, to give them the skills, the tools, and the techniques and the knowledge to address the public's mental health, to understand in a much, much deeper way the conversations you're going to be having today about psychosocial issues, structural issues, and inequalities. And the third thing is data and intelligence. Public Health England inherited a wonderful set of public health observatories, and I hope they've done them justice in turning some of that work into really effective data and intelligence. And we have a National Mental Health Intelligence Network now. And I think what I would like to see is much more emphasis in the data on psychosocial issues as we go forward. And that's something that we'd love to engage with you and colleagues in academia and elsewhere. 2 more minutes, sorry. We're getting somewhere where we embed psychosocial issues in. We're getting somewhere with our obesity colleagues, our alcohol colleagues, and our smoking colleagues. And it's a shame I can't stay the whole day, but I would love to interact with you through Emily after this to just get a sense of your research and your thoughts so we can maybe pull together some form of briefing that we can give to our colleagues on the psychosocial approaches and the stressors. Emerging, one thing I would say that's emerging, I wasn't a fan initially, but I'm getting more of a fan of our One You campaign. It's the first integrated campaign. We fought hard to get mental health issues in there, so we got stress and sleep in, which was good because doing mental health was too big. So we're quite happy with that. And that seems to be going down well, but again, I worry about that individualized approach, but I think it's good. I think it's good. And I think the other thing that excites me is the integrated wellness services. And there's someone in your interest group that's been doing some studies of integrated wellness services. Are they in the room? Is it Sharon?
She's in this room.
Yeah.
Yes, she's not here today.
Oh, okay. So that would have been great to speak to her about that. And we're publishing something later on this year on psychosocial pathways to health that we're doing with Michael Marmon's Institute. And we really do think we're trying to look for a way of getting other colleagues not to see the things they need to do as mental health things, but as psychosocial elements where the mind and the body come together more effectively to make improved public health. Okay, so let me just end on some positives. We've been preparing for one of our directors to go to Shanghai for a WHO massive, great, 9th World Health Promotion conference. And quite a lot of what they'll be talking about is germane to these issues. The social movements, the advocating for stronger alignment of health promotion with civil society and social justice issues, the importance of healthy and well-connected communities, and the recognition of the psychosocial processes and factors. So sometimes, just when you sometimes feel how hard it is to get some of these messages across, there is some kind of light. And maybe some of the conversations happening internationally help affect us nationally, help affect us locally. So what I'm saying is we are all part of a much bigger movement and narrative trying to embed these in the work that we do. Still lots of many challenges, but if I leave you with 4 messages: to broaden who we engage in these discussions, deepen the work we do within issues like cardiovascular, obesity, smoking, and alcohol, and a call for much more research and evidence into psychosocial factors and stressors, and a much bigger campaign of getting NIHR and ESRC and other major funders to put research money this way, because here lies some of the ways that we're going to improve the public's mental health and well-being for the future. Thank you very much.